No mountain range on Earth has shaped a continent quite like the Alps have shaped Europe. For millennia, these colossal, jagged peaks have been far more than just a beautiful natural border on a map. In reality, they have operated as a relentless, unforgiving geopolitical force carving out the very trajectory of human history and systematically dictating cultures from the rise of ancient empires to the complex borders of today's modern nation-states. But how exactly did this frozen barrier play such a pivotal, almost manipulative role in designing the Europe we recognize today? What hidden logistical traps do these peaks hold? Well, to truly understand this geographic anomaly, we have to take a deep, analytical look at the raw mechanics of what is essentially a massive, impenetrable stone wall built right across the heart of the continent. And right here is where geography completely rewrites European history. Imagine a colossal natural fortress stretching directly across the vulnerable heart of Europe. Its jagged, ice-locked peaks and immense glacial valleys forming an imposing, almost terrifying geological barrier. These are the Alps, a mountain range so vast, structural, and geopolitically influential that it demands to be called Europe's true Great Wall. And yes, while historians might argue that the literal Great Wall of Europe refers to the ancient stone fortifications of Ston in Croatia, when you look purely at geographic placement, resource control, and tactical isolation, the title fits the Alps far more accurately. More than just a collection of impressive mountains for postcards, the Alps operate as a ruthless geographic force, directly dictating the socio-economic lives of those trapped within their frozen embrace, while indirectly controlling the macroclimate, the continental river networks, and the historical cultures of an entire landmass. This formidable mountain range spans roughly 1,200 kilometers in a massive, sweeping arc across 8 distinct sovereign nations: France, Switzerland, Monaco, Italy, Liechtenstein, Austria, Germany, and Slovenia. It stands proud as the highest and most extensive mountain range system lying entirely within the borders of Europe, physically altering an area of about 200,000 square kilometers. Yet, on a planetary scale, this actually makes it a surprisingly compact mountain range. For perspective, the massive Rocky Mountains in North America comprise a staggering 780,000 square miles, revealing just how compressed Europe's geographic spine truly is. The origin story of the Alps is a brutal tale of raw, unimaginable geological power, a dramatic, slow-motion continental collision that ignited some 65 million years ago. It is the direct consequence of the massive African tectonic plate grinding ruthlessly against the stable Eurasian plate. This relentless, ongoing subterranean pressure forced the Earth's crust to violently buckle, fold, and thrust skyward, carving out the towering peaks we see today. Crucially, this immense architectural process is still actively happening right now, albeit at such an incredibly microscopic pace that humanity would never notice it without advanced satellite imagery. Within this sprawling Alpine expanse, the Alps do not form a uniform, flat wall, but rather a hyper-complex labyrinth of distinct subranges, each possessing its own dangerous, unique character. Here, you will find the absolute apex of the continent, Mont Blanc, towering at a majestic 4,809 meters right on the high-stakes border between France and Italy, flanked by other legendary, deadly giants like the Matterhorn and the Eiger. These iconic peaks do not just look impressive from an airplane window. Their extreme ruggedness, sheer vertical drops, and steep, avalanche-prone slopes define the very logistical limits of Central Europe. In fact, these massifs exert a profound, manipulative grip on the weather patterns and climate systems across the entire European theater. Acting as an unyielding meteorological barrier, the Alps systematically divide the milder, moisture-heavy oceanic climate of Western Europe from the hot, sun-drenched Mediterranean climate to the south and the harsh, brutal continental weather zones dominating the east. Colossal clouds carrying billions of tons of moisture from the Atlantic Ocean are ruthlessly forced upward by these high peaks, triggering an intense atmospheric phenomenon that unloads massive, relentless rainfall and heavy snowfall onto the northern and western slopes. This precise mechanism creates hyper-fertile, lush valleys and incredibly dense, permanent snowpacks, which serve as the absolute critical life support system for the region's delicate ecosystem and human industrial activity. But right here is where the geography of the Alps takes an incredibly fascinating, unexpected turn. Unlike almost every other major mountain system on Earth, the Alps do not cause a devastating, desert-making rain shadow effect across the continent. This climate anomaly is primarily due to a unique layout. The mountains run in a strict east to west orientation. And because Europe's dominant weather patterns also march from east to west, the air flows along the valleys rather than getting entirely blocked. While a localized minor rain shadow effect does exist for the Italian city of Turin, it is completely insignificant compared to the barren, arid expanses created across the massive interior of North America by the Rocky Mountains. Naturally, this immense accumulated alpine snowfall is far more than a scenic winter wonder. It functions as the primary high-output hydrological engine for some of Europe's largest, most strategically vital rivers. The Rhine, the Rhone, the Po, and the Danube all trace their ultimate icy origins back to this singular alpine core. As the massive winter snowpacks and prehistoric glaciers slowly melt during the spring, they continuously feed these aquatic arteries, which then snake outwards across thousands of kilometers, providing fresh drinking water, extensive irrigation for trillions of dollars worth of agriculture, and vital, highly active logistical transport routes for hundreds of millions of people. The cascading impact of this mountain range is astonishingly far-reaching. A downstream farmer working the soil in the lowlands of the Netherlands, thousands of kilometers away from the nearest mountain peak, relies entirely on the steady flow of the Rhine for his survival, a river born directly from the melting snows of a distant alpine summit. Furthermore, this relentless abundance of alpine water feeds into numerous deep lakes nestled securely within the lower mountain valleys. World-famous bodies of water like Lake Geneva, Lake Como, and Lake Garda are not merely stunning tourist destinations. They act as massive, crucial geographic reservoirs, stabilizing river flows across seasons, preventing catastrophic basin flooding, and anchoring multi-billion-dollar local economies through tourism and freshwater fishing. Suffice it to say, the Alps have carved a monumental, irreplaceable footprint into the absolute physical and economic geography of Europe. So much so that without the single frozen wall, the distinct, powerful European civilizations that developed through the centuries would be completely unrecognizable. For millennia, the Alps have stood as an unyielding, imposing natural barrier, profoundly manipulating the exact manner in which human populations and sprawling civilizations have developed across the fractured European continent. These monolithic peaks acted simultaneously as a formidable defensive shield and a brutal, life-threatening obstacle for expanding cultures, ultimately carving out ancient migration patterns, forging empire boundaries, choking off trade routes, and dictating the very cultural identity of today's European nation-state. For the earliest hominids and modern humans setting foot in prehistoric Europe, the Alps presented an almost impossible logistical nightmare. While the low-lying valleys and sheltered lower slopes offered fertile soil and fresh water, attempting to cross the high-altitude, sub-zero alpine passes was a highly perilous, frequently fatal undertaking. Yet, humanity was relentlessly drawn to them, regardless of the danger. Archaeological evidence reveals that prehistoric hunter-gatherers and later early Neolithic farmers successfully navigated this vertical, treacherous terrain as far back as 30,000 years ago. Even more shocking, the deep evolutionary footprint of Neanderthals can be traced in these rugged highlands as far back as 45,000 years. proving that this wall has been contested since the dawn of humanity. As complex civilizations rose and inevitably fell, the raw strategic importance of the Alps became utterly undeniable. The unstoppable Roman Empire, in its aggressive northern expansion, faced the ultimate logistical bottleneck, integrating and governing the vast, untamed lands sitting directly north of the Italian peninsula. It was right here that legendary figures stepped into historical myth. Hannibal, the brilliant Carthaginian general, famously defied all conventional military logic in 218 BCE by marching his massive army and an entire contingent of war elephants directly across the frozen, treacherous Alpine passes. This terrifying, unexpected tactical feat completely traumatized Rome, exposing the immense, uncovered underbelly of the Italian geography. In response, Roman legions aggressively established military forts and heavily fortified numerous high-altitude checkpoints, most notably the Great Street, Bernard Pass, systematically transforming dangerous mountain tracks into vital, high-security arteries for rapid military deployments, imperial trade monopolies, and secure state communication. During the chaotic transition into the Middle Ages, the Alps continued to ruthlessly define regional borders and swing the fragile balance of European power dynamics. They functioned as a stark natural frontier, physically segregating entirely distinct cultural, linguistic, and political spheres. The highly fragmented, isolated nature of the Alpine valleys directly sparked the rise of intensely independent insular communities. Most famously, the early Swiss cantons perfectly leveraged this vertically hostile terrain as an asymmetric defensive weapon against massive, heavily armed feudal empires. These tightly bound mountain communities developed highly unique, decentralized forms of self-governance and legendary military prowess, converting a challenging landscape into an absolute tactical superpower. To this day, the sheer geographic fortress of Switzerland has only truly been violated and conquered a couple of times in recorded history. Once by the crushing weight of the Roman Empire roughly 2,000 years ago, and later in 1798 during the chaotic French Revolutionary Wars, where it was forcefully restructured into the short-lived Helvetic Republic. Even during the global devastation of both the First and Second World Wars, Nazi Germany and the Axis powers calculated that Switzerland was simply not worth the immense blood and economic effort to conquer. The nation was simply too strategically fortified by the surrounding Alpine wall, turning any potential invasion into a guaranteed military meat grinder. Crucially, these mountains were far more than just passive defensive walls. They were hyper-lucrative, high-stakes trade conduits. Despite the constant threat of avalanches and bandits, Alpine passes were the absolute essential lifelines for heavy commercial goods moving between the industrial hubs of Northern Europe and the wealthy Mediterranean maritime states. Merchants regularly risked their lives transporting vital salt, fine wine, luxury textiles, and precious metals, simultaneously fostering continental economic exchanges and deep cultural diffusion. Total logistical control over these specific passes translated directly into staggering state wealth and massive geopolitical leverage, triggering centuries of bitter regional competition, blockades, and bloody conflicts over these strategic choke points. Towns positioned directly along these lucrative avenues, such as Innsbruck and Geneva, rapidly prospered, transforming from small mountain outposts into wealthy, powerful global hubs of trade, finance, and hospitality. As Europe continuously evolved and modern nation-states began their violent formation, the Alps played a decisive, immovable role in exactly where the final international borders would fall. Because this mountain system functioned as an insurmountable natural wall, it ultimately dictated the exact political boundaries of modern France, Italy, Switzerland, Austria, and even Germany. Put simply, the rugged, vertical terrain made prolonged imperial conquest and cross-mountain logistics so incredibly difficult that it became significantly easier for rulers to draw their official state borders right at the foothills or straight through the prize, center of the massifs, rather than wasting blood trying to govern them. Therefore, to dismiss the Alps as a mere mountain range is a massive geographic mistake. Over millenniums, this frozen wall literally separated peoples, linguistic groups, and entire cultures. Most notably, it served as a protective shield that allowed ancient Rome and subsequent fractured Italian states to independently flourish with relatively little outside interference. Without this single wall, it is entirely worth asking, would the Roman Empire have ever even existed at all? Or would it have been crushed in its infancy? But all of that high-stakes drama is locked in the history books. Which leaves us with a critical, modern question. How exactly do the layout, tunnels, and resources of the Alps impact the geopolitics of Europe today? In our contemporary era, this monolithic spine continues to wield an extraordinarily profound structural dominance over the entire European landmass. Granted, the historical nightmares of traversing this frozen abyss have been comprehensively neutralized by mind-bending feats of modern civil engineering, whether through colossal subterranean rail systems, high-altitude highway networks, or transcontinental commercial aviation. Yet, as a direct consequence of this hyperconnectivity, the massifs are now adapting to unprecedented anthropogenic pressures, anchoring themselves even more deeply into the macroeconomics of European survival. Shifting away from its ancient role as an isolated, impenetrable void, the 21st century Alpine system functions as a hyperactive geopolitical artery. The pristine, high-altitude Alpine vistas, combined with massive, reliable winter snowpacks, have transformed this territory into what is indisputably the absolute focal point for global mountain recreation and international tourism, especially when calculating the raw density of human migration to the region. Annually, an astonishing 120 million global travelers descend upon these slopes to ski, snowboard, mountaineer, trek, cycle, and immerse themselves in the sheer, gravity-defying architecture of the landscape. This relentless human influx directly underwrites a multi-billion-dollar economic web, securing the primary livelihoods for an expansive population of mountain communities. It forms a financial lifeline, extending from Alpine resort conglomerates and elite ski instructions to localized multi-generational artisans and independent culinary establishments. World-renowned, iconic Alpine citadels like Zermatt, Chamonix, and Kitzbühel serve as high-output economic engines, paradoxically proving that the exact same vertically hostile geographic elements that once paralyzed ancient armies are now magnetically pulling humanity in. However, the modern weight of the Alps stretches far beyond luxury tourism sectors. In reality, they constitute Europe's most critical, irreplaceable repository of freshwater and high-capacity hydroelectric power generation. The staggering volume of winter snowpacks and massive prehistoric valley glaciers continuously replenish the primary headwaters of the continent's most strategically vital river systems: the Rhine, the Rhone, the Po, and the Danube. Consequently, this geographic barrier is no longer viewed merely as a fortress wall, but as the true water tower of Europe, fundamentally supplying freshwater reserves, massive agricultural irrigation projects, and heavy industrial supply lines to sovereign states situated thousands of kilometers away from the actual summits. Consider the sheer scale of the Danube. It originates in the dense highlands of Germany, gathering volume as it cuts through Austria, Hungary, Serbia, Bulgaria, and Romania, before ultimately discharging its massive payload into the Black Sea. Furthermore, the extreme vertical gradients of the terrain, combined with this reliable, high-output aquatic velocity, create a flawless environment for macro-scale hydroelectricity projects, injecting massive baseload power directly into the integrated energy grids of surrounding industrial powers. Switzerland, operating as a prime case study, derives a striking 48% of its total domestic electricity budget purely from hydropower, aggressively drawing this clean energy from the violent currents of Alpine rivers. Yet, despite this outward appearance of industrial invulnerability, the Alps are dangerously exposed to the creeping systemic erosion of global climate change. Statistically, The European continent is warming at a velocity far outstripping industrial zones like the United States or mainland China. As a direct result, the Alpine ecosystem is experiencing temperature spikes at a clip significantly faster than the documented planetary average, triggering rapid, visible disruptions across the topography. Permanent valley glaciers, which have defined the landscape for millennia, are currently in a state of catastrophic, accelerated retreat. This ecological decay means that stable winter snow lines are moving higher up the peaks, while the ancient subterranean permafrost holding the mountainsides together is actively thawing. The cascading implications of this collapse are profoundly terrifying, jeopardizing not only the foundational freshwater security of the lowlands, but also shattering the structural integrity of high-altitude transit infrastructure and threatening the economic viability of winter tourism. Alpine skiing is a cultural phenomenon that draws millions of international consumers to Europe every single winter. If the snowpacks continue to destabilize, this global migration will abruptly freeze, inflicting devastating economic suffering onto isolated mountain communities that have grown to rely entirely on that localized revenue loop. Even in the face of these multiplying environmental vulnerabilities, this mountain range remains an absolute non-negotiable international transit corridor. A hyper-sophisticated underworld network of deep-based tunnels and heavily engineered passes, including the record-breaking Gotthard base tunnel and the strategic Brenner pass, facilitates the seamless, uninterrupted flow of heavy freight and human traffic between the industrial powerhouse of Northern Europe and the Mediterranean shipping lanes of the South. Beyond logistics, the Alpine Arc stands as a sanctuary of immense biodiversity and global ecological preservation. Its extreme variance in altitude, combined with thousands of distinct microclimates, nurtures a highly specialized, fragile web of flora and fauna, many species of which are radically endemic, existing nowhere else on the planet. Remarkably, the very linguistic term alpine, which was natively derived directly from the name of the Alps, has been universally adopted by geographers to define any extreme, high-altitude mountain system across the globe. It is now standard practice for exceptionally dramatic mountain walls to officially integrate the name into their own branding, such as the Southern Alps dominating New Zealand or the rugged Oregon Alps located deep within the American Pacific Northwest. As of today, approximately 14 million people permanently reside within the immediate geographic footprint of the Alpine Arc. This dense demographic includes the absolute majority of citizens in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, expansive sectors of Austria and Slovenia, and tighter mountain border populations belonging to Germany, France, and Italy. Yet, while these specific sovereign states are the only political entities physically touching the mountains, you can be completely certain that in one way or another, the logistical, environmental, and hydrological reach of the Alps directly manipulates every single nation-state across the entire European theater. That is the true measure of how vital, prominent, and structurally non-negotiable this geographic feature is to the continent. To the history of Europe, the Alps represent something infinitely more profound than a beautiful geological formation on a map. While similar statements can certainly be made for the sprawling spine of the Andes in South America or the vast Rocky Mountains of North America, the Alps literally engineered the cultures, insulated the empires, and forged the definitive borders of the Western world. And that is a level of geopolitical manipulation that no other mountain range on planet Earth can claim. As always, I hope you enjoy learning all about the Alps in Europe. If you did, maybe you'll enjoy this video all about North America's Great Basin. Thanks for watching. See you next time.